I've never believed in haunted schools or weird urban legends. I always rolled my eyes when people talked about energy or bad vibes in a building. But what happened that fall morning at Maplewood High? It broke something in me, something I don't think I'll ever get back. It started like any other Monday. The air was crisp, the trees outside were just starting to turn that perfect shade of orange and gold, and there was still leftover buzz from Friday night's football win. People were smiling, laughing. Teachers were sipping their coffee and pretending they didn't hate us. I was in third period chemistry when everything changed. Right before it happened, I remember looking at the clock. 10:41 a.m. I remember that because I was counting down the minutes until lunch. That's when the static started crackling from the overhead speaker. We all flinched. Mr. Barlow was mid-sentence when it cut in, loud and sharp. Then came Principal Harris's voice, but it didn't sound like him. It was raspy, unsteady, and low. Attention all students and staff. We are now under lockdown. This is not a drill. That's it. Just that. No instructions, no reason, no tone of authority, just fear. Plain, trembling fear. Mr. Barlow blinked a few times. I think he wanted to say something, but he just walked to the door and locked it without a word. Then he pulled down the blinds and shut off the lights. The room went dark, quiet. The class instinctively shuffled away from the windows. Everyone's breath got a little shallower, a little sharper. Phones lit up here and there, people trying to text or scroll, but the service had suddenly gone to trash. I didn't know it then, but that's when it started. The weirdness, the dread, the feeling that something was wrong. Not just someone brought a weapon to school wrong, but wrong in a way that doesn't make sense. Across the hall, I could see into room 312 through a crack in their blinds. A teacher was holding her students back with both arms, like she could shield them from whatever was out there. I thought I saw someone crawl under a desk and pray, and then it got quiet. Too quiet. Not just everyone shut up quiet. It was like the school itself was holding its breath. No intercom, no hallway noise, no more classes switching, no fire alarms, just silence. Deep, awful silence. Until we heard the first sound. It wasn't footsteps. It was slower than that. Heavier. Like something dragging. Something deliberate. Every few seconds, a scraping sound echoed down the tiled hallway, like metal on stone. No one said a word. I wish I could say I didn't feel scared. I wish I could say I kept my cool. But something about that sound. It scraped not just against the floor, but against your spine. It didn't belong in a school. It didn't belong anywhere. The worst part? It was getting closer. The dragging sound didn't stop. It just got closer. We sat there in Mr. Barlow's classroom, frozen. No one dared to speak. The sound echoed off the linoleum floor like it was right outside. But every time I tried to tell myself it was just the janitor, something deep in my gut told me otherwise. Across the room, Kayla clutched her phone with shaking hands, trying to text her mom. No bars, just a spinning circle. That's when I realized something truly messed up. The lights on the emergency exit signs were flickering. Not just dimming, flickering. Like someone was messing with the wiring, or like the school itself was trying to shut down. Then the scraping stopped. And that silence? It was louder than the noise. I swear I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. Mr. Barlow was at his desk, gripping the edge so hard his knuckles were white. No one moved. No one breathed. Until... knock. One soft knock on the classroom door. Not a bang, not a pound. Just a gentle, deliberate knock. Everyone turned to look at the door like it was a bomb about to go off. Then came a second knock. Louder. Then a third. Harder. Mr. Barlow raised a trembling finger to his lips. No sound, he mouthed. No movement. But then, we heard the voice. Low, raspy, and wrong. Like someone gargling gravel in their throat. I know you're in there. That's when Jaden, sitting closest to the door, whispered, "What the hell is that?" No one answered. We couldn't. The door handle twitched, not turned, twitched, like it was alive, like someone, or something, was testing it. I bit down on my lip until I tasted blood. The handle slowly began to rotate left, then right, back and forth. Slow, methodical. Not like someone trying to bust in, but like someone toying with us. Something about the way it moved made me feel sick. It was too calm, too patient. Suddenly the handle stopped. A long pause. Then came another whisper. Room 312. First. We all stared at each other. Was that another room? Before we could process it, the handle released with a soft click, and the scraping sound resumed. Fainter now, moving away. We stayed in that classroom, frozen, until we heard it again. A scream. From down the hallway. Muffled. Short. Then silence. That's when Jaden stood up and bolted toward the door's small viewing window. "Jaden, don't," I whispered. But it was too late. He looked out. He looked, and then he turned back around. His face was pale, his mouth hanging open. He didn't speak. He couldn't. All he did was back away from the door slowly and sit down. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "It's not human." There's a sound that lives in my head now. A knock. Not just any knock. That knock. But what still haunts me more than the sound itself is the voice that followed. Room 312. First. It was clear. Deliberate. Like it had already chosen its order. I wasn't in room 312 when it happened. I was still in Barlow's class, watching helplessly through the window blinds like the world had split in two. Room 312 was just across the hallway. At first, it looked quiet. Still. The kind of stillness you don't realize is wrong until you feel it pressing in on your chest. But then came the movement. Through the narrow classroom window, I saw Colin. His face pale, eyes wide. He was peeking out like he didn't know whether to scream or stay frozen. Next to him was a girl. Sarah, I think. She looked like she was praying without making a sound. And then, the shadow came. It moved differently than anything I'd ever seen. Too slow, but with purpose. Like every step was calculated. It didn't walk. It glided, dragging something behind it that scraped the floor with a metal-on-bone shriek. It stopped in front of room 312 and waited, not moving, not speaking, until the knock. One soft, single knock. Inside, I saw the teacher, Mrs. Carter, step in front of the door like she could protect them. Her lips moved, probably telling the students to stay quiet, to breathe through their panic. But then it knocked again. Louder. The shadow leaned in close. Too close. Like it could sense them through the wall. And then, just like in our room, the handle twisted. Left. Right. Slowly. And then, "I know you're in there." That voice didn't sound like it came from a human throat. It scraped. It gurgled. Like it came from somewhere much deeper. From where I sat, I could see Colin press his hand over his mouth. He was crying, trying not to sob. A kid next to him crawled under a desk and started shaking. The handle kept turning. Then suddenly, it stopped. For a moment, I thought maybe it was over. Maybe the thing gave up. But then I saw the figure lean down and press its face, if that's what it even was, against the glass. Its eyes glowed faintly red, like embers in a dying fire. And just for a moment, I swear it smiled. Not like a person, like a wolf, like something that enjoyed the fear. Then it turned and glided down the hall. But the silence didn't return this time. Instead, it was broken by a sound that didn't belong in a school. A scream, short, sharp, and then nothing. That's when everything changed in room 312. Colin had never seen that much blood. Not in real life. Not up close. Not like this. He'd only peeked for a second, but it was enough to burn the image into his mind. Streaks of red smeared along the lockers, something dragging along the floor, and a limp hand trailing behind. The figure didn't even look back. It just glided down the hall, disappearing into the foggy fluorescent distance like it had done this before. Colin turned from the door, his voice barely audible. It's dragging someone. Gasps. A few students started crying. Mrs. Carter was visibly shaking now. She tried to speak, tried to keep control, but her voice cracked. We need to stay calm, stay quiet. We're safe as long as we stay in here. No, Sarah said suddenly, her voice firmer than anyone expected. We're not safe. You saw it. That thing, it's not just some intruder. The room shifted. Whispers rose. Everyone could feel it, that gnawing sense of wrongness. Then something clicked in Sarah's memory. The hatch, behind the cabinet. Colin blinked. What hatch? My brother told me. He graduated last year. Maintenance access behind the old supply cabinet. Leads down to the basement storage. They sealed it up years ago, but it's still there. For a moment, no one moved. Then Mrs. Carter stepped forward. Sarah, are you sure? Sarah nodded. It's our only shot. The class mobilized quickly. Fear gave them purpose. Desks were pushed quietly. The tall, dusty cabinet in the corner scraped as they shifted it away from the wall. And there it was, a rusted metal panel bolted into the wall. Mrs. Carter knelt beside it. Her hands trembled as she twisted at the bolts with a pair of scissors. Colin helped, using the sharp edge of a broken ruler to pry at the corners. Time seemed to melt away, every second stretching thin with tension. All the while, they listened, prayed, that the scraping didn't return. After what felt like hours, the panel creaked open. A cold, musty air wafted from the dark space beyond. One by one, they climbed in. The hatch dropped into a narrow shaft, leading to a cobweb-filled corridor that sloped downward into darkness. The last one in was Mrs. Carter. She closed the hatch behind her with a slow, quiet thud. The silence was replaced with something else now. Dripping water, the scuttle of unseen bugs, and something deeper. Whispers. So faint they could almost pretend they weren't real. Almost. They crept through the narrow passage. Their phone flashlights barely cut through the pitch. The basement was colder than it had any right to be. A few students slipped on the wet stone. Their breathing echoed louder than footsteps. That's when they saw it. Words. Scrawled in something dark and dried across the crumbling brick walls. You can't escape, I see you. He waits. Colin stopped walking. He turned slowly to Sarah. This was supposed to lead outside. Sarah swallowed hard. I thought it did. Behind them, someone whimpered. Up ahead, a red glow flickered for just a second, far down the hall. Then, vanished. A chill swept through them. Not a breeze. A presence. Colin whispered what they were all thinking. We're not alone down here. The deeper they went, the harder it was to pretend the whispers weren't real. They didn't echo like normal sounds. They curled around the edges of their thoughts, threading through memories that weren't theirs. Voices that sounded familiar, like parents, friends, even their own. Colin. He stopped walking. Did you hear that? Sarah turned back. What? He shook his head. Nothing. Thought someone said my name. The basement was larger than anyone had expected, way larger than the blueprints would ever show. What started as a narrow utility corridor had opened into a sprawling warren of crumbling stone walls, rusted lockers, and collapsed support beams. It was like a version of the school that had been buried alive. Mrs. Carter tried to guide them, flashlight trembling in her hand. Stay close. Stay together. But they weren't alone. Every now and then, someone would flinch, swearing they saw movement in the corner of their eye. A flicker of something wrong, just out of reach. Then came the symbols. They were carved into the walls, deep gouges of strange spirals and jagged shapes, etched in with something sharp. Some were filled in with blood. Others still dripped. Silence feeds him. Light blinds him. He was born here. Colin froze in front of one phrase, smeared just above a broken drinking fountain. We invited him. What does that mean? He asked, staring at it. No one answered. Ahead, the hallway bent sharply to the left. The dim red glow they'd seen earlier flickered again, this time closer. Then they heard a sound that made them stop cold. Breathing. But it didn't come from any of them. It was wet, labored, as if lungs that weren't built for breathing were trying anyway. Then, a shuffle, a dragging footstep. Then another. Mrs. Carter hissed, "Lights off." Now. They killed the flashlights. The basement dropped into pitch, total black. They stood frozen in that corridor, surrounded by carved walls and whispers, listening to the thing approach. Colin held his breath, counting the steps. 1, 2, 3. Then silence. He could feel something in the dark now. Not near him. Around him. Like the air itself had thickened. Something brushed against his shoulder. He flinched. But no one screamed. Not yet. A light flickered suddenly in the distance. Not from a flashlight, something older. An exit sign. But as they crept toward it, they passed a crumbling door, barely hanging on its hinges. On the other side, something scratched at the wood. Softly. Then came the voice. Not from behind the door. From above them. "I remember your names." Colin looked up and saw two red eyes glowing down from the ceiling beams, watching, waiting. Colin's breath hitched as the red eyes blinked once, then vanished into the rafters above. Gone. Just like that. But the air still felt thick, pressed in, like the thing hadn't left, just become part of the walls again. They didn't speak. They just moved. Quietly, quickly, toward the glowing exit sign at the far end of the corridor. It flickered as they approached, revealing a rusted metal door beneath it. Sarah reached for the handle, but it didn't budge. Locked. Of course. Mrs. Carter cursed under her breath, a word none of them ever expected to hear from her, and turned to look for another way. That's when they noticed something new. A narrow side tunnel to their right, partially caved in, but just wide enough to squeeze through. "We have no choice," she said. They crawled in one by one, ducking beneath collapsed beams and broken pipework. On the other side, they entered what looked like a forgotten classroom. Chalkboards lined the walls. Rotting desks filled the center of the room. But everything was wrong, like it was frozen in time and rotting at the same time. Old, dusty textbooks were still stacked neatly. Faded artwork from kids hung crookedly on the bulletin board. In the center of the room stood something different. A tall wooden chair, like one you'd see in an old church. Around it, burned into the floor, was a circle of symbols, identical to the ones they'd seen carved in the hallway. But this wasn't vandalism. This was ritual. Sarah whispered, "What is this?" Colin stepped forward slowly, his foot hitting something small and metallic, a tape recorder. He bent down and picked it up. The plastic was brittle, old. It looked like it hadn't worked in years. But to his surprise, when he hit play, the tape clicked to life. A voice crackled through. Old, male, calm, but eerily detached. "Test number 16. Subject collapsed after 4 minutes in the circle. The whispering began earlier this time. We believe the entity's bond is strengthening." Colin looked up. Everyone else had stopped breathing. The voice continued. "This school was never meant to hold it. It was buried here, contained. But the walls are cracking. The circle won't hold much longer." The tape clicked again, fast-forwarding. Another voice, more frantic now. "If this is heard by anyone, shut it down. Burn the floor. Seal the tunnels. Do not let him breach the surface. He remembers names. He learns them." The tape died. Sarah backed away from the chair like it might reach out and grab her. Mrs. Carter looked around the room, her voice barely a whisper. They knew. Whoever was here before, they knew what was down here. And that's when they all heard it again. The scraping, the dragging. But this time, it wasn't behind them. It was below them. Colin turned to the floor. The circle in the center of the room was pulsing now, barely visible red veins of light snaking through the old burn marks. And rising from the center of it, a hand, black, skeletal, clawed, and reaching. The hand kept rising. Blackened fingers with sharpened tips curled out from the circle in the floor like they were tasting the air. The basement classroom was ice cold now. Not like winter cold, but bone deep, breath-stealing, soul cold. Everyone backed away. Sarah tripped over a broken desk leg and nearly fell backward into the chalkboard. Colin grabbed her arm and pulled her up, his eyes never leaving the thing in the circle. The circle was glowing now, pulsing in rhythm, like a heartbeat. Mrs. Carter screamed, "Run!" They didn't need to be told twice. The group turned and sprinted out the way they came, crawling back through the narrow tunnel, scraping their knees and shoulders as debris rained down from the unstable ceiling. Something roared behind them, not a sound meant for human ears. It was deep and shuddering, like the basement itself had just woken up hungry. And it was angry. Once through the tunnel, they burst back into the larger corridor, gasping for breath, trembling. The faint red light above the exit sign was flickering again, like it was calling to them. But the scraping sound had returned, closer, faster, every direction. Colin spun in place. "It's surrounding us!" "No!" Sarah pointed down a side corridor. "Look, a stairwell!" Half collapsed, barely intact, but a way up. They ran. Every step sent dust and echoes through the walls. The whispers returned, louder now, like they were being shouted in slow motion. As they reached the base of the stairs, Colin paused, just for a second. A plaque on the wall, rusty, half faded, but the words were still there. In memory of Principal Elias G. Harris, 1962 to 1995, for protecting what should never have been unearthed. Colin blinked. Harris? But Principal Harris had spoken to them this morning. Hadn't he? A scream pulled him back. The creature was coming, not walking, crawling along the ceiling like some ancient broken spider. Its arms reached too far. Its face was still shrouded in shadow, but those glowing eyes, they were looking right at Colin. "You opened it." The voice wasn't in his ears. It was in his mind, inside him. "I know you now." Colin's nose began to bleed. He stumbled up the stairs, half dragged by Sarah, the rest of the group already ahead, pounding upward into what looked like a maintenance hallway. "Go! Go!" Mrs. Carter shouted from the top. As they cleared the last step, Sarah slammed a steel utility door behind them. Colin fell forward onto the cold tile floor of a supply room. They were back inside the school. Back in the real school. But nothing felt real anymore. They lay there in silence for a long time, listening. No more scraping, no breathing, just their own. Colin sat up, dizzy. That plaque. It said Principal Harris died in '95. Mrs. Carter froze. "Number, that's not right. That can't be." "Then who made the announcement?" Sarah asked. That's when the PA system above them crackled again. The same broken static. Then that voice. "Lockdown is lifted. Return to your classes." But this time, it wasn't shaky. It was calm. Too calm. The voice wasn't just Principal Harris's. It was the entity, mocking them. They didn't return to their classes, not even after the voice said to. The PA system crackled again a few minutes later, playing some static-laced instrumental. What sounded like an old lullaby warped through a broken speaker. That was the moment Mrs. Carter made the call. "We run." They found a side exit at the end of the supply hallway. Rusted, barely holding on its hinges, but when Sarah shoved her shoulder into it, the latch gave way. Cold, fresh air poured in like a lifeline. They spilled out into the faculty parking lot behind the gym. The sky was still blue. Leaves still danced lazily across the asphalt. Somewhere in the distance, a car horn honked. The world was still turning. But something inside each of them had stopped. Mrs. Carter grabbed her phone. Still no service. She tried the emergency line. Nothing. It wasn't until they'd sprinted across the block, far from the school, that a signal finally broke through. She called 911, and this time, it rang. The police arrived 20 minutes later, guns drawn, sirens blaring, helicopters overhead, SWAT K-9 units, even the fire department and a hazmat team. They stormed the school. They searched for hours, but they found nothing. No bodies, no blood, no signs of a breach, no record of a lockdown call ever going out. And when they pulled the security tapes, blank. Every camera feed from the morning was either corrupted or missing entirely. They questioned the kids for hours, then days. Psychologists, detectives, even FBI analysts were brought in to assess what one agent called a collective psychogenic event. But the students weren't faking. The fear was real. The trauma was etched into their eyes. Then came the part that broke Colin. At the hospital, while getting his stitches checked, a nurse asked him to confirm something on his intake form. "You're the one from Maplewood, right? The lockdown thing?" He nodded. She tapped her pen against the form. "Just a quick clarification. Was it your Principal Harris or the one who died in that fire?" Colin blinked. "What fire?" The nurse gave him a strange look. "Maplewood, the old wing, years ago. Your principal back then, Elias Harris, died trying to save kids in the basement. Whole floor caved in. You didn't know?" Colin couldn't answer, because he remembered the voice, on the intercom, that deep, trembling tone, and he remembered the plaque in the basement. "In memory of Principal Elias G. Harris, 1962 to 1995. For protecting what should never have been unearthed. There was no drill, no threat, no intruder. There was only it. Whatever had been waiting down there, trapped by salt and steel and secrets, someone had dug too deep, opened too wide, invited it back, and now it knew names. It knew them." Colin moved away. Sarah stopped speaking for nearly a year. Mrs. Carter quit teaching altogether. But sometimes, late at night, Colin swears he hears static through his bedroom speakers. Just a whisper. "Attention all students. This is not a drill." He doesn't sleep much anymore. And he never, ever walks past a closed classroom door without checking the handle, just in case it starts to turn.